Heron 19794, Minating.com Judge Lisa Monroe took a sip of her coffee and glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 9:30 on a Tuesday morning, and the Miami courthouse was already buzzing with activity. She had been a judge for 7 years now, and most days felt like a routine she could do with her eyes closed. Traffic violations, petty theft cases, domestic disputes. Same problems, different faces. But that morning felt different somehow. Maybe it was the weather. The Florida heat was already seeping through the courthouse windows, making everyone a little more irritable than usual. Or maybe it was just one of those days where everything feels slightly off, like when you wake up from a dream you can't quite remember. Lisa straightened her black robe and walked into the courtroom. The bailiff stood at attention, and the handful of people scattered across the wooden benches looked up. Some were defendants waiting for their cases to be called. Others were family members nervously clutching tissues or legal documents. Lisa had seen it all before. The fear, the hope, the resignation in people's eyes. After 7 years, she thought nothing could surprise her anymore. She was wrong. The bailiff cleared his throat and called out the next case. Case number 2024 CR 8847, the State of Florida versus Christopher Davis. Charges include felony theft and possession of stolen property. Lisa glanced down at the file in front of her. Christopher Davis, age 42. No prior criminal record. Accused of stealing electronics worth over $5,000 from the warehouse where he worked as a night janitor. The case seemed straightforward enough. Security footage, witness statements, stolen items recovered from his apartment. Open and shut, really. The side door opened and a deputy led the defendant into the courtroom. The man shuffled forward in handcuffs, wearing the standard orange jumpsuit that every inmate wore. His head was down, shoulders hunched forward like he was trying to make himself invisible. Lisa had seen that posture 1,000 times. Shame does that to people. It makes them want to disappear. But then the man looked up. Lisa felt her breath catch in her throat. Her hand froze halfway to her water glass. Time seemed to slow down in that moment, the way it does when your brain is trying to process something impossible. Those eyes, that face, the small scar above his left eyebrow shaped like a crescent moon. It couldn't be. It just couldn't be. But it was. Standing there in handcuffs in an orange jumpsuit was Tommy. Tommy Davis. Her Tommy. Her best friend from childhood. The boy who used to walk her home from school every single day. The kid who shared his lunch with her when her mom was working double shifts and forgot to pack her anything. The friend who taught her how to ride a bike and promised they would both get out of the neighborhood someday and make something of themselves. Tommy. Here, in her courtroom. As a defendant, Lisa realized she had been staring. Everyone in the courtroom was waiting for her to say something, to do something. The prosecutor looked confused. The public defender was checking her notes. And Tommy, he was looking right at her now. Recognition flashed across his face, followed immediately by something that looked like pain. Pure, raw pain. He dropped his gaze immediately, staring down at his handcuffed wrists. His jaw clenched tight. She could see his shoulders shaking slightly, though whether from emotion or just nerves she couldn't tell. Lisa's mind was racing. How long had it been? 25 years? 26? She had left Liberty City the summer she turned 16. Got a full scholarship to a fancy prep school across town. New uniform, new friends, new life. She remembered the day she told Tommy she was leaving. They were sitting on the steps of her apartment building, splitting a candy bar like they always did. He had been so happy for her. Genuinely, purely happy. "You're getting out, Lisa," he had said, using the nickname only he called her. "You're gonna be somebody. You're gonna do amazing things." She had promised to stay in touch, promised to call, to visit, but life got busy. The prep school led to college, then law school, then a clerkship, then a position at a firm, then finally, the judgeship. Somewhere along the way, the calls stopped. The visits never happened. Liberty City became a place she drove past on the highway, not a place she returned to. And Tommy? She hadn't thought about Tommy in years. Hadn't wondered what happened to him, where life had taken him, whether he had achieved his own dreams. She had simply moved forward, never looking back. Now here he was, and she couldn't look away. The prosecutor started reading the charges, her voice cutting through Lisa's thoughts. "Your Honor, the defendant Christopher Davis is charged with 1 count of grand theft and 1 count of possession of stolen property. On the night of September 15th, security footage captured the defendant removing multiple boxes of electronics from warehouse storage. These items, valued at over $5,000, were later recovered from the defendant's apartment during a search conducted with a valid warrant. Lisa forced herself to focus on the words. She was a judge. She had a job to do. Personal feelings, personal history, none of that mattered in a courtroom. The law was the law. Evidence was evidence. But her hands were trembling slightly as she looked down at the file again. According to the paperwork, Tommy worked 3 jobs. The warehouse position was his 3rd, working midnight to 6 in the morning. He was a single father. His wife had died 2 years ago. He had twin daughters, 14 years old. 14. The same age they had been when they used to dream about the future together. When everything seemed possible and the world felt both terrifying and exciting at the same time, the public defender spoke up. She was a young woman, probably fresh out of law school with nervous energy and an overstuffed briefcase. Your Honor, my client wishes to enter a plea of not guilty. While we acknowledge that certain items were found in his possession, the circumstances surrounding how those items came to be there are not as straightforward as the prosecution suggests. Lisa nodded slowly, still trying to gather her thoughts. She needed to say something, anything, but what? Should she acknowledge that she knew him? Should she recuse herself from the case immediately? That would be the proper thing to do, the ethical thing. But something stopped her, some instinct she couldn't quite name. Mr. Davis, she said, her voice coming out more steady than she expected. Do you understand the charges against you? Tommy looked up again. Their eyes met. 26 years collapsed into nothing. For a moment, they weren't a judge and a defendant. They were just 2 kids from Liberty City, 2 friends who had promised to look out for each other. Yes, Your Honor, he said quietly. His voice was deeper than she remembered, rougher around the edges, but still somehow familiar. I understand. And do you understand your rights? Yes, Your Honor. The formal language felt wrong. Calling him Mr. Davis felt wrong. All of it felt wrong. Lisa's mind was screaming at her to stop, to recuse herself, to hand this case over to another judge. But she couldn't seem to make the words come out. Instead, she heard herself say, I'm calling a 15-minute recess. We'll reconvene shortly to set a preliminary hearing date. She banged her gavel before anyone could object, stood up quickly and walked out of the courtroom. She made it to her chambers before her legs started shaking. She closed the door, leaned against it, and took a deep breath. Then another. But it didn't help. Nothing helped, because the truth was staring her right in the face. She had left Tommy behind. She had forgotten about him, about everyone from that neighborhood. She had built her success on the foundation of leaving it all behind and never looking back. And now the past had walked into her courtroom in handcuffs, looking at her with eyes that held no accusation, only sadness. Lisa walked to her desk and picked up the case file with shaking hands. What was she supposed to do now? What was the right thing to do? And why did it feel like the answer to that question was going to change everything? Lisa sat in her chambers staring at the case file without really seeing it. Her mind kept replaying that moment when Tommy looked up and their eyes met. The shock, the recognition, the shame on his face. She pressed her fingers against her temples, trying to organize her thoughts into something that made sense. 15 minutes wasn't enough time. She needed hours, days maybe. But the courtroom was waiting. People were waiting. Justice didn't stop just because a judge's entire world had been turned upside down. She opened the file and forced herself to read every detail. Tommy had been working at Patterson Electronics warehouse for 8 months. Before that, he worked at a grocery store during the day and drove for a rideshare company on weekends. The warehouse job was overnight, midnight to 6 in the morning. 3 jobs total. Lisa tried to imagine that kind of schedule and couldn't. When did he sleep? When did he see his daughters? The incident report said that on September 15th, around 3 in the morning, security cameras captured someone moving boxes from the storage area to a loading dock. The footage was grainy, but the person wore a jacket identical to the ones issued to warehouse employees. 2 days later, management conducted an inventory check and discovered that 15 laptops, 20 tablets, and various other electronics were missing. Total value $5,200. When confronted, Tommy initially denied everything. But when police searched his apartment with a warrant, they found boxes in his bedroom closet. Not all of the missing items, but enough. 6 laptops, 8 tablets, all still in their original packaging. Lisa flipped through the photos from the search. Tommy's apartment was small but clean. She could see children's drawings taped to the refrigerator in the background of one photo. A father-daughter dance announcement on the kitchen table in another. This wasn't the home of a criminal. This was the home of someone struggling to keep everything together. There was a knock on her door. "Come in," Lisa said, closing the file quickly. Her clerk, Daniel, poked his head in. He was an older man who had worked at the courthouse for 30 years and had seen everything twice. "Judge Monroe, the attorneys are asking if you need more time. They're getting anxious out there." Lisa took a deep breath. "Daniel, I need you to pull up the judicial ethics guidelines for me. Section on conflicts of interest and recusal." Daniel's eyebrows went up slightly, but he didn't ask questions. He never did. That's why Lisa liked him. "Right away, Your Honor. I'll have it on your computer in 2 minutes." When the door closed, Lisa stood up and walked to the window. From her chambers, she could see the parking lot and beyond that, the Miami skyline. Glass towers reaching toward the sky. She had an office in one of those towers once, back when she was a corporate attorney making more money than she knew what to do with. Everything had seemed so clear back then. Work hard, win cases, make partner, become a judge. A straight line from point A to point B. But life wasn't a straight line. It was messy and complicated and full of unexpected turns, like your childhood best friend showing up in your courtroom wearing handcuffs. Her computer beeped. Daniel had sent the ethics guidelines. Lisa sat down and read through the relevant sections. The language was clear. Judges must recuse themselves from any case where their impartiality might reasonably be questioned. Previous relationships with defendants definitely fell into that category. The right thing to do, the ethical thing, was to hand this case over to another judge immediately. Lisa reached for her phone to call the chief judge. Her finger hovered over the number, but she didn't press it. Instead, she found herself reading through the case file again. Something was bothering her. Something didn't add up. Tommy had worked at that warehouse for 8 months. 8 months without a single incident. Not one complaint, not one problem. His employee reviews were actually quite good. Reliable, his supervisor had written. Always on time. Does his job without complaint. And before that, his record was completely clean. No arrests. No trouble with the law. Nothing. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, he steals $5,200 worth of electronics. It didn't make sense. The Tommy she knew was honest to a fault. She remembered the time they found a wallet on the sidewalk when they were 12. Inside was $40 and a driver's license. Tommy had insisted they take a bus across town to return it to the address on the license, even though $40 was a fortune to them back then. Even though they could have kept it and no one would have known. "That's not who we are, Lisa," he had said. "We're not thieves. Could people change that much?" Could 26 years turn someone honest into a thief? Maybe. Life was hard. Life could break people. Lisa had seen it happen in her courtroom more times than she could count. Good people making bad choices out of desperation. But something still felt off. Lisa picked up the phone, this time calling the prosecutor's office. A woman answered on the third ring. "Prosecutor's office, this is Beverly speaking." "Beverly, this is Judge Monroe. I need to speak with whoever's handling the Davis case. Case number 2024, CR 8847. "That would be Mr. Peterson, Your Honor. Let me transfer you." A moment later, a man's voice came on the line. "Your Honor, this is David Peterson. How can I help you?" "Mr. Peterson, I'm looking at the Davis file. I need to disclose something before we proceed any further. The defendant and I knew each other as children. We grew up in the same neighborhood and were close friends until I left for high school. I haven't seen or spoken to him in over 25 years, but I wanted to make you aware of this connection." There was a pause on the other end. "I see. Are you planning to recuse yourself, Your Honor?" "I'm considering it. But first, I wanted to give you the opportunity to object or request a different judge if you feel this creates a conflict." "Well, Your Honor, I appreciate your honesty. Can you be impartial despite this prior relationship?" Lisa thought about that question. Could she? "I believe I can follow the law and evaluate the evidence fairly, yes. But I understand if you'd prefer another judge. Let me consult with my supervisor and get back to you within the hour." "Will that work?" "That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Peterson." Lisa hung up and sat back in her chair. Now she needed to talk to Tommy's attorney. She buzzed Daniel again. "Can you ask the public defender on the Davis case to come to my chambers, please?" 5 minutes later, there was another knock. The young public defender from earlier stepped in, looking nervous. She was probably in her late 20s, with her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and a suit that had seen better days. Public defenders didn't make much money. Lisa knew that from experience. She had done a brief stint as a public defender right out of law school before the student loans pushed her toward corporate law. "Your Honor, I'm Rebecca Chen. I'm representing Mr. Davis. Please." "Sit down, Rebecca." Lisa gestured to the chair across from her desk. "I need to disclose something to you. The defendant and I knew each other when we were children. We were close friends until I was 15. I haven't had any contact with him since then, but I wanted you to be aware of this before we proceed." Rebecca's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, that's unexpected. I've already informed the prosecutor. I'm giving both sides the option to request my recusal if you feel this creates a problem. I want to be completely transparent about this." Rebecca was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking. "May I speak with my client about this, Your Honor? I think he should have input on the decision." "Of course. That's appropriate." "Thank you, Your Honor. I'll speak with him and let you know." After Rebecca left, Lisa was alone again with her thoughts. She walked back to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there was Liberty City, the neighborhood where she and Tommy grew up. She hadn't been back there in years. Hadn't wanted to go back. It represented everything she had worked so hard to escape. The poverty, the struggle, the feeling of being trapped with no way out. But Tommy never got out. He stayed. He built a life there, had a family there, and when tragedy struck, when his wife died and left him alone with 2 teenage daughters, he didn't run. He stayed and fought. 3 jobs, working around the clock, trying to hold everything together, and now he was facing prison time. If convicted, the mandatory minimum was 3 years. 3 years away from his daughters during some of the most important years of their lives. 3 years in a cell, labeled as a thief, a criminal. Lisa's phone rang. It was Peterson, the prosecutor. "Your Honor, I've consulted with my supervisor. We don't object to you remaining on the case. We trust your judgment. Thank you, Mr. Peterson." 10 minutes later, Rebecca called back. "Your Honor, I've spoken with my client. He actually requests that you remain on the case." He said, and I quote, "I trust her." "I always have." Lisa felt her throat tighten. She closed her eyes and took a slow breath. "Thank you for letting me know, Rebecca. Tell Mr. Davis I'll do my best to be fair." When she hung up, Lisa sat in silence for a long moment. Both sides wanted her to stay on the case. Tommy wanted her to stay. That should have made the decision easier, but instead it made everything more complicated, because now she had to figure out what fair actually meant. Was it fair to judge an old friend? Was it fair to let that friendship cloud her view of the evidence? Or was it fair to bring every bit of knowledge she had about Tommy's character into her evaluation of this case? She didn't know, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't just go through the motions on this one. She couldn't treat this like just another case in an endless stream of cases. Whether she liked it or not, this mattered. Tommy mattered. And after 26 years of pretending that part of her life didn't exist, she couldn't ignore it anymore. Lisa picked up the case file one more time. But now she wasn't just reading it as a judge. She was reading it as someone who knew the person behind the defendant's name, and that changed everything. The trial began 3 weeks later on a cloudy Thursday morning. Lisa had barely slept the night before. She kept thinking about Tommy, about his daughters, about what this verdict would mean for all of them. But she also kept reminding herself that she was a judge first. The law had to come before everything else, even old friendships. The courtroom was more crowded than usual. Word had gotten out about the judge recognizing her childhood friend, and reporters were scattered throughout the benches, notebooks ready. Lisa hated that. This wasn't entertainment. This was someone's life hanging in the balance. Tommy sat at the defense table wearing a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit right. His attorney, Rebecca, kept whispering things to him, probably going over last-minute strategy. He looked tired, more than tired. Exhausted in a way that went deeper just lack of sleep. Behind him in the gallery sat 2 teenage girls, Tommy's daughters. They had to be. They had his eyes, his smile, though neither was smiling now. They looked terrified, holding hands so tightly their knuckles had turned white. Lisa felt her heart break a little just looking at them. The prosecutor, David Peterson, stood up to give his opening statement. He was good at his job, confident but not arrogant. He laid out the case in clear, simple terms. Security footage showed someone in a warehouse employee jacket moving boxes at 3 in the morning. Inventory revealed missing electronics. Those same electronics were found in Tommy's apartment. The evidence was straightforward, open and shut. When he finished, Rebecca stood up for the defense. She was nervous. Lisa could tell by the way she kept adjusting her glasses and clearing her throat. But her voice was steady when she spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is not as simple as the prosecution wants you to believe. Yes, those items were found in my client's apartment. But the question isn't whether they were there. The question is how they got there. And the answer to that question will change everything you think you know about this case. Over the next 2 days, the prosecution called their witnesses. First came the warehouse manager, a man named Gerald Hopkins. He explained the security system, the inventory process, the discovery of the theft. He seemed honest enough. Just a guy doing his job, trying to run a business. Then came the security guard who had been on duty that night. He testified that he made his rounds every hour and didn't see anything unusual. But when Peterson showed him the security footage, he admitted he couldn't identify who was in the video. The lighting was too dim, and the person's face was turned away from the camera. Next was Tommy's direct supervisor, a man named Vincent Miller. He had worked at the warehouse for 12 years and knew every employee by name. When Peterson asked him about Tommy, Vincent's expression turned cold. Mr. Davis was a decent worker at first, Vincent said. Always showed up on time, did what he was told. But then he started getting sloppy. Missing details. I had to talk to him about it several times. And did you have any knowledge of the theft before it was discovered? Peterson asked. None whatsoever. When the inventory came up short, I was just as shocked as everyone else. Then when we found out it was Tommy, I couldn't believe it. But the evidence doesn't lie. Lisa watched Tommy's face during this testimony. He sat perfectly still, but she could see the muscle in his jaw working. He was angry or hurt, maybe both. When it was Rebecca's turn to cross-examine Vincent, she started slowly, almost gently. Mr. Miller, you said my client started getting sloppy. Can you be more specific about what you mean? Just little things. Not restocking shelves properly, missing spots when mopping, that kind of thing. And when did this start happening? Vincent thought for a moment. Maybe 6 months ago? Around there. 6 months ago would have been March, is that correct? Yeah, sounds about right. Rebecca picked up a piece of paper from her table. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Defense Exhibit A into evidence. This is a death certificate for Angela Davis, the defendant's wife. Date of death, March 14th. The courtroom went quiet. Lisa looked at the document Rebecca handed to the bailiff. Tommy's wife had died of cancer. The same month Vincent said Tommy started getting sloppy at work. Rebecca continued, her voice softer now. Mr. Miller, were you aware that my client's wife had passed away? Vincent shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I might have heard something about it. I don't really remember. You don't remember one of your employees losing his wife? We have a lot of employees. I can't keep track of everyone's personal life. Rebecca let that statement hang in the air for a moment. The jury didn't look impressed with Vincent's answer. Neither did Lisa. The next witness was the police officer who had executed the search warrant on Tommy's apartment. He described finding the boxes in the bedroom closet, still sealed in their original packaging. When Rebecca asked him if Tommy had resisted or tried to hide anything, the officer admitted that Tommy had been cooperative and seemed genuinely confused about why they were there. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Tommy took the stand. Rebecca guided him through his background. 3 jobs to support his daughters after his wife died. Medical bills that were drowning him. The constant fear that he wasn't doing enough wasn't being enough for his girls. Mr. Davis, Rebecca asked, did you steal those electronics from the warehouse? Tommy looked directly at the jury. No, ma'am. I did not. Then how did they end up in your apartment? Tommy took a deep breath. My supervisor, Vincent Miller, he gave them to me. About a week before everything happened, he pulled me aside during my shift. He said the warehouse had some damaged items they were throwing out. Said they couldn't sell them, so they were just going to toss them. He asked if I wanted them. A murmur went through the courtroom. Peterson sat up straighter in his chair. Tommy continued. I was suspicious at first. Asked him if it was really okay. He showed me a form, said it was all authorized. I still hesitated, but then I thought about my daughters. Their birthday was coming up, and I hadn't been able to buy them anything nice in so long. Not since their mom got sick, so I said yes. I took the boxes home and put them in my closet, planning to give them to the girls on their birthday. And did you have any reason to believe these items were stolen? No, ma'am. Vincent showed me paperwork. He said it was all legitimate. I trusted him. He was my supervisor. Why would he lie? Peterson stood up for cross-examination and he came out swinging. Mr. Davis, you expect this jury to believe that your supervisor just gave you thousands of dollars worth of electronics out of the goodness of his heart? He said they were damaged. Said they were being thrown out anyway. But they weren't damaged, were they? When police found them, they were in perfect condition. I didn't know that. I never opened the boxes. How convenient. And this form your supervisor supposedly showed you, do you have a copy of it? Tommy's face fell. No, he just showed it to me. He didn't give me a copy. Of course he didn't, so we're just supposed to take your word for it that this form existed? I'm telling the truth. Are you? Or are you just making up a story because you got caught? Rebecca objected, but the damage was done. Tommy looked defeated. The jury looked skeptical. Lisa felt her stomach sink. The story sounded far-fetched even to her, and she wanted to believe him. But then Rebecca stood up for redirect examination. Mr. Davis, in all the years you've worked various jobs, have you ever been accused of theft before? No, ma'am, never. Have you ever been arrested for anything? No, ma'am. Do you have any prior criminal record at all? No, ma'am. This is the first time I've ever been in trouble with the law. Rebecca turned to the judge. Your Honor, the defense would like to call a rebuttal witness. We'd like to recall Vincent Miller to the stand. Peterson jumped up. Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Miller has already testified. Rebecca pulled out another document. Your Honor, we've obtained Mr. Miller's bank records through a subpoena. We have new information that directly contradicts his earlier testimony. Lisa looked at the document. Her eyes widened slightly. Objection overruled. Mr. Miller, please return to the stand. Vincent walked back up, looking significantly less confident than before. Rebecca approached him with the bank records in hand. Mr. Miller, you testified that you had no knowledge of any theft, correct? That's right. And you said you were shocked when the electronics went missing? Yes. Then can you explain why, 3 days after the theft was discovered, you deposited $3,500 in cash into your checking account? Vincent's face went pale. I sold some things. What things? Personal items. Stuff from my garage. $3,500 worth of personal items? In 3 days? Rebecca's voice was sharp now. And can you explain why 2 weeks later you made a cash payment of $8,000 toward a new truck? The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel. Peterson was on his feet asking for a recess. But Lisa could see it now. The whole picture was becoming clear. Rebecca wasn't done. Mr. Miller, isn't it true that you were stealing from the warehouse for months? And when an inventory audit was announced, you panicked and planted evidence in my client's apartment to cover your own tracks. That's ridiculous, is it? Because we've also obtained your online selling history. You've been selling electronics on various websites for the past 8 months. Would you like to explain that? Vincent's lawyer, who had been sitting quietly in the gallery, suddenly stood up and started making his way toward his client. But it was too late. The truth was out. Lisa called for a recess and asked to see both attorneys in her chambers immediately. When the door closed, she turned to Peterson. Tell me you're seeing what I'm seeing. Peterson ran his hand through his hair. This case just fell apart. I need to investigate Miller immediately. If what the defense is suggesting is true, then an innocent man almost went to prison. Lisa finished. The next 48 hours moved like lightning. Peterson's office launched a full investigation into Vincent Miller. They pulled his phone records, his computer history, every financial transaction for the past year. What they found was damning. Vincent had been selling stolen warehouse inventory online for almost 10 months. He had made over $30,000. And when the company announced a surprise inventory audit, he had panicked. Tommy's apartment had been the perfect target. Vincent had access to everyone's employee files. He knew Tommy was struggling financially, knew he was desperate, knew that if stolen goods showed up in Tommy's home, people would believe he took them. It was calculated, cold, and it had almost worked. By Monday morning, Vincent Miller was in custody facing multiple felony charges. The evidence against him was overwhelming. He had deleted his online seller accounts, but digital footprints never really disappear. The police recovered everything: chat logs with buyers, photos of the stolen items, bank deposits that matched sale dates perfectly. Lisa sat in her chambers reading through the updated reports. She should have felt relieved. The truth had come out. Justice was being served. But instead she felt angry. Angry at Vincent for what he'd done. Angry at a system that had almost convicted an innocent man. Angry at herself for all the years she'd stayed away, never checking on Tommy, never wondering if he needed help. There was a knock on her door. "Come in." Rebecca entered, looking exhausted but triumphant. "Your Honor, the prosecution has filed a motion to dismiss all charges against Mr. Davis. They're asking for an emergency hearing this afternoon." "I've seen the motion. We'll convene at 2 o'clock. Rebecca hesitated at the door. "Your Honor, if I may say something off the record?" Lisa nodded. "What you did staying on this case even though you knew him, it made all the difference. Another judge might not have looked as closely at the details. Might not have given me the latitude to investigate further. You saved an innocent man's life." After Rebecca left, Lisa sat alone with those words. Had she really made a difference? Or had she just gotten lucky? She didn't know. But she did know that in 2 hours she would dismiss the charges against Tommy. He would walk out of that courtroom a free man. And then what? They would go back to being strangers? She would return to her comfortable life, and he would return to his 3 jobs and his struggling existence? That didn't feel right. None of it felt right anymore. At 2 o'clock, the courtroom filled up again. Even more reporters this time. The story had made the local news. Innocent man framed by supervisor. Judge's childhood friend nearly convicted. The headlines were everywhere. Lisa hated the attention, but she understood it. This was the kind of story people needed to hear. A reminder that the justice system wasn't perfect. That innocent people really did get accused. That one person's greed could destroy another person's life. Tommy sat at the defense table in the same borrowed suit. His daughters were there again, and this time they looked hopeful. Like maybe, just maybe, their nightmare was finally ending. Peterson stood and addressed the court. "Your Honor, in light of new evidence that has come to light, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Christopher Davis. The evidence clearly demonstrates that Mr. Davis was the victim of a deliberate frame-up by his supervisor, Vincent Miller. Mr. Miller has been arrested and charged with multiple counts of theft, fraud, and evidence tampering. We apologize to Mr. Davis for the ordeal he has endured, and acknowledge that he should never have been charged in the first place." The courtroom erupted in applause. Tommy dropped his head into his hands, his shoulders shaking. His daughters were crying, holding on to each other. Rebecca was smiling, gathering her papers with shaking hands. Lisa banged her gavel for silence. But she didn't smile, not yet. Because what she was about to do next would shock everyone in that courtroom. "Mr. Davis, please stand." Tommy stood up, wiping his eyes. He looked at Lisa with an expression of pure gratitude. "Mr. Davis, all criminal charges against you are hereby dismissed. You are free to go." She paused, and the courtroom started to applaud again. But Lisa held up her hand. "However, before you leave this courtroom, there is something else we need to address." The room went quiet. Confused glances were exchanged. Rebecca looked up sharply, concern crossing her face. Peterson frowned. What was the judge doing? The case was dismissed. It was over. Lisa took a deep breath. "Mr. Davis, during the course of this trial, certain facts came to light that trouble this court. You testified that your supervisor showed you a form authorizing you to take those electronics. You believed they were damaged goods being discarded. Is that correct?" Tommy looked confused. "Yes, Your Honor. But you accepted workplace property and took it home without obtaining a copy of that authorization. You didn't verify the information with management. You didn't follow proper procedure. Is that also correct?" Tommy's face fell. Yes, Your Honor. But I understand what you thought, Mr. Davis, and I believe you were deceived. However, the fact remains that you exercised poor judgment. You accepted valuable property without proper documentation. While you were clearly a victim of fraud, you also failed to protect yourself by following appropriate protocols." Rebecca stood up. "Your Honor, with all due respect, my client was framed. He's the victim here. The charges have been dismissed. The criminal charges have been dismissed, yes, but this court has a responsibility to address all matters that come before it. Lisa looked directly at Tommy. Mr. Davis, I am hereby ordering you to complete 200 hours of community service. The courtroom exploded. Reporters were scribbling frantically. Tommy looked like he'd been slapped. His daughters gasped. Rebecca's mouth fell open in shock. Your Honor, this is highly irregular, Peterson said, standing up. The charges are dismissed. On what grounds are you ordering community service? Lisa had anticipated this question. She had spent the entire morning researching case law, making sure what she was about to do was legal. The court has inherent authority to impose conditions related to matters that come before it. While Mr. Davis is not guilty of the crimes he was charged with, his actions demonstrated a lack of judgment that this court feels should be addressed through community service, rather than simply being ignored. Rebecca looked ready to argue, but Tommy put his hand on her arm. It's okay, he said quietly. It's not okay, Rebecca hissed. This is punishing you for being a victim. But Lisa wasn't done. She turned to address Tommy directly and her voice softened. Mr. Davis, this community service will be served at Liberty City Youth Center. You will mentor at-risk teenagers, help them with homework, share your experiences, show them that making mistakes doesn't define who you are. Tommy looked up at her, confusion in his eyes. Lisa continued, and now her voice carried an emotion she had been holding back for weeks. And I will be joining you. For every hour you serve, I will be there serving alongside you. Together, we will create a mentorship program for kids from our old neighborhood. Kids who need to see that there are people who care. People who remember where they came from. The courtroom went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Lisa saw the understanding dawn on Tommy's face. This wasn't a punishment. This was something else entirely. Your Honor, Peterson said slowly, judges don't typically volunteer alongside defendants they've sentenced. You're right, Mr. Peterson. They don't, but I'm not a typical judge, and this isn't a typical case. Lisa looked out at the courtroom at all the shocked faces. 26 years ago, I left Liberty City and never looked back. I convinced myself that leaving was enough, that my success was enough, but it wasn't. I forgot about the people who helped me get where I am. I forgot about my friend, and I'm not going to forget anymore. She turned back to Tommy. I can't give you back the months you spent worrying about prison. I can't undo the pain this case caused you and your daughters. But I can show up. I can be present. And I can help make sure other kids from our neighborhood don't fall through the cracks the way we almost let you fall through the cracks. Tommy was crying openly now. Not tears of sadness, but something else. Something bigger. Thank you, Lisa, he said, using her childhood nickname for the first time in 26 years. Thank you for coming back. Lisa felt her own eyes getting wet, but she blinked the tears away. She was still a judge. She still had a courtroom to run. But she was also Lisa Monroe from Liberty City, Tommy Davis's best friend. And maybe, just maybe, she could be both. This court is adjourned. She banged the gavel. As the courtroom emptied, Tommy's daughters ran to him, throwing their arms around him. He held them tight, whispering that everything was going to be okay now. Rebecca was shaking her head in disbelief, but she was smiling too. Lisa watched from the bench as Tommy looked up at her one more time. He mouthed 2 words, thank you. She nodded. Because sometimes justice wasn't just about following the law. Sometimes it was about doing what was right. And after 26 years, Lisa was finally ready to do what was right, even if it shocked everyone in the process. 6 months later, Lisa stood in front of the Liberty City Youth Center, holding 2 boxes of pizza and wondering if she was crazy. It was Saturday morning and she could have been sleeping in. Could have been at brunch with her lawyer friends. Could have been doing literally anything else. But instead she was here back in the neighborhood she'd spent decades trying to forget. The building looked different than she remembered. Someone had painted a mural on the side wall. Bright colors, kids playing, words like hope and future in bold letters. It was nice, hopeful. Exactly what this place needed to be. Tommy pulled up in his old Toyota, and his daughters climbed out of the back seat. They had become regular volunteers, too, helping with the younger kids. Lisa had gotten to know them over the past months. Mia was the quiet one, always reading, always thinking. Sophie was the talker, full of energy and questions. Both were smart as whips. Both reminded Lisa of their father at that age. Morning, Judge Monroe. Mia called out, grabbing a box of pizza from Lisa's hands. How many times do I have to tell you? It's just Lisa when we're here. Old habits, Sophie grinned. You're kind of intimidating, you know. Tommy laughed, walking up behind his daughters. She used to be afraid of her own shadow. Trust me, if you'd known her at your age, intimidating would be the last word you'd use. Oh, really? Lisa raised an eyebrow.
Should I tell them about the time you screamed and ran away from a butterfly?
That was a moth, and it was huge. Completely justified reaction. The girls laughed, and Lisa felt something warm in her chest. This feeling right here, this is what she'd been missing all these years. Not just friendship, but family. A sense of belonging to something bigger than herself. They headed inside where 23 teenagers were already waiting. The program had grown way beyond what Lisa had imagined. What started as just her and Tommy meeting with a handful of kids had turned into something real. Something that mattered. They had tutors now. Volunteers from law firms, tech companies, hospitals. People who wanted to give back. People who saw what Lisa and Tommy were building and wanted to be part of it. All right, everyone, let's get started, Tommy called out. Who finished their college application essays? About half the hands went up. 6 months ago, none of these kids were even thinking about college. Now they were writing essays, visiting campuses, dreaming about futures that felt possible. A boy named Carlos raised his hand. Miss Lisa, can you look at mine? I'm not sure if it's any good. Lisa sat down next to him and read through his essay. It was about growing up with parents who barely spoke English, working at his family's restaurant every day after school, trying to balance homework with helping to support his family. It was raw and honest and beautiful. Carlos, this is excellent. Really excellent. You think so? I was worried it was too personal. Personal is good. Personal is what makes you stand out. The admissions people read thousands of essays. They need to see who you really are, not some polished version you think they want to see. As the morning went on, Lisa moved from table to table, helping with math homework, reviewing essays, answering questions about law school, about her career, about how she made it out of this neighborhood. She used to hate these questions. They reminded her of everything she wanted to forget. But now she saw them differently. These kids needed to know it was possible. They needed to see someone who came from where they came from and made it. During lunch, Tommy and Lisa sat on the front steps eating pizza with the kids. A girl named Destiny was telling them about getting accepted into a summer program at the community college. My mom cried when I told her. Destiny said, smiling. Happy tears, you know. She never finished high school, so the idea of me going to college, it means everything to her. What do you want to study? Lisa asked. Criminal justice. I want to be a lawyer. Maybe even a judge someday. Destiny looked at Lisa with stars in her eyes. Like you. Lisa felt her throat get tight. You can do it. I believe in you. After the kids left, Lisa and Tommy stayed behind to clean up. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, throwing away paper plates and stacking chairs. It felt natural, easy, like no time had passed at all. You know what's wild? Tommy said, breaking the silence. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over. Thought I was going to prison. Thought my daughters would grow up ashamed of their father. But you didn't go to prison. You were innocent, I know. But even after the charges were dropped, I felt lost. Felt like I'd failed somehow. Then you did that crazy thing in the courtroom, sentencing me to community service. He laughed and shook his head. I was so confused. Angry even. I thought you were punishing me for something I didn't do. I know. I saw your face. But then I got it. You weren't punishing me. You were giving me something. A purpose. A way to turn all that pain into something good. Tommy looked at her. You gave me my life back, Lisa. Not just by believing I was innocent, but by showing me that what happened to me mattered. That I could use it to help other people. Lisa felt tears threatening again. She seemed to cry more in the past 6 months than she had in the previous 10 years. You gave me something too. You reminded me where I came from. Reminded me that success doesn't mean anything if you forget the people who helped you dream it was possible. They finished cleaning in silence. But it was a good silence, the kind you can only have with people who really know you. As they walked to their cars, Tommy stopped.
Hey, remember that promise we made when we were kids?
Sitting on those apartment steps? Lisa smiled. We made a lot of promises on those steps. The big one. We said that if we ever made it out, if we ever became successful, we'd come back. We'd help other kids like us, I remember. I broke that promise. No, you didn't. You're keeping it now. That's what matters. Lisa unlocked her car but didn't get in yet. Tommy, I need to tell you something. The Legal Ethics Board reviewed my decision to stay on your case. Some people filed complaints, said I should have recused myself immediately. Tommy's face went pale. Are you in trouble? Because of me? No, it's okay. They reviewed everything and said while my decision was unconventional, it was within my authority. But they did suggest that maybe I got too emotionally involved, that I let our friendship cloud my judgment. Did you? Lisa thought about that question. Did she? Honestly? I don't know. Maybe I did. But you know what? I don't regret it. Not for a second. Because if I had recused myself, another judge might not have looked as closely, might not have given Rebecca the room to investigate. You might be in prison right now, but your reputation, or my reputation, is fine. Better than fine, actually. You know what happened last week? 3 other judges approached me asking how to start similar programs in their districts. They saw what we're doing here and want to do the same thing. We're starting a movement, Tommy, a real movement. Tommy grinned. A movement. Listen to you. Still thinking big. I learned from the best. As Lisa drove home that evening, she took a detour through the old neighborhood, past the apartment building where she grew up, past the corner store where she and Tommy used to buy candy, past the school they attended together. It all looked different now, smaller somehow, less scary, just a neighborhood like any other, full of people trying to make it through another day. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mia. Thank you for today, Lisa. You and Dad are changing lives, including mine and Sophie's. We're proud to know you. Lisa pulled over and sat in her car reading that message 3 times. Proud to know her. When was the last time someone said that to her? Not proud of her accomplishments or her title or her success, just proud to know her as a person. That night, Lisa couldn't sleep. But it wasn't worry keeping her awake. It was excitement. She kept thinking about the kids, about their futures, about all the possibilities ahead. She thought about Carlos and his college essay, about Destiny wanting to be a judge, about Mia and Sophie having their father in their lives free and happy. And she thought about Tommy, her best friend who she'd found again after 26 years, who forgave her for leaving, who welcomed her back without judgment, who showed her that coming home didn't mean going backward. It meant moving forward with purpose. The courtroom reunion that started with handcuffs and shame had turned into something beautiful, something neither of them could have predicted. They were kids from Liberty City who took different paths, but both paths led them back to the same place, back to each other, back to their neighborhood, back to the promise they made on those apartment steps all those years ago. Some people say you can't go home again. But Lisa had learned something important. You can go home. You just have to be brave enough to face what you left behind. And when you do, when you really do, you might find that home was waiting for you all along. Tommy texted her before she finally fell asleep. Same time next Saturday? Lisa smiled in the darkness. Wouldn't miss it for the world, because that was the truth. She wouldn't miss it. Not anymore. Not ever again. Some things were worth showing up for. Some people were worth coming back for. And some promises, even when broken, could still be kept. The judge had recognized her childhood friend on trial. And what happened next shocked everyone. But the real shock wasn't the verdict or the sentencing or the media attention. The real shock was simpler and more profound than that. 2 friends found each other again. And in finding each other, they found a way to change the world, 1 kid at a time. And that was the greatest verdict of all.